I lived in Iran. I lived around a lot of Muslims. It's a 99%, I think, Muslim nation. And we were a Christian family being raised there, my mother and my father. Mother's Armenian, my dad's Assyrian. Like I speak Aramaic, I speak Armenian, I speak Farsi. So that was us. And we go to a small little church, and I went to an Armenian school called Gulbegnan, and I went to an Assyrian school called Behnam. And there you go, 99.4%, of Iran's population is Muslim. And so it was kind of like, you got to be careful what's going on. When you're watching news every night, U.S. is the enemy. It's the evil empire. The Shah was a puppet. They owned him. They controlled him. He was doing everything he could to destroy the values and principles that Iran has. And this was nonstop, fed to you whether you had a choice.
Do you think you have a little residue of that in your mental?
Not at all. Like residue meaning like taking that position?
And, no, I just think, do you think it's left any traces on your thought?
On the what side? On what it is to live amongst Muslims?
No. That kind of having absorbed that when you were growing up.
Yeah, my mother was a part of the Communist Party. She was part of the Two-Day Party. Right. So she was actually, they escaped.
Double danger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, my dad was an imperialist. So you want to talk about, they got married and divorced to each other twice. Each other. No, literally. They married, my sister's born, divorced, like remarried, I'm born, divorced to each other. Like Elizabeth Taylor, yes, for some that follow the history. Yeah, she was part of this party. Two-day party of Iran. And
they were the ones who were massacred big time in the 80s in the prisons.
Yes. And so that's...
By the man who was just released from Sweden in the prisoner swap.
Yes. It's interesting that you're going back to that. That was not good. Yeah, no, that was not good. Yeah. But going back to this, your experience. Jews, 0.2% of U.S. population, 17% of all billionaires in U.S. Why do they make so much money, and why are they so successful financially?
First thing is that it's a funny one. Sorry, I laugh just because it's. I think there are certain tropes that people fall into. Okay, we just mentioned one, which is the Churchill trope, which is a relatively modern one. But if you want to demoralize a Western population, particularly the British population, you have to come for Churchill. And it's a concerted effort in my mind. This isn't to say I don't know what's happening with the Tucker interview, but the left has deliberately come for Churchill because it destroys one of the holy places of the British psyche. It destroys the idea that we have been a force for good in the world. And it destroys the idea that what did happen, which is we stood alone against Adolf Hitler. And as a result, Western Europe and the rest of the continent, and indeed Britain, did not fall into the hands of Nazi fascism. But I'm interested when people fall into that. Likewise, and we mentioned some of it earlier, what I would regard as being not necessarily conspiratorial thinking, but falling into certain ruts. I think that the Jews are a sort of rut that people can fall into. And one reason I say that is because it's a very interesting thing in the history of the Jews that they can be simultaneously accused of almost everything. You mentioned that they're disproportionately successful and wealthy.
That's what Jordan Peterson talked about when he did a video explaining the IQ score of Ashkenazi Jews and explaining the fact that there's a reason why they make more money is because their IQ is above and beyond the average, community. And this is him talking about it.
Sure. I've talked about it. Jordan's a great friend. I know. Yep. I've spoken about this. But I just mentioned it because historically, Jews have been attacked for being poor as often as they've been attacked for being rich, and sometimes simultaneously. 19th century European anti-Semitism, for instance, relied on the cognitive dissonance of the Rothschilds and also poor Eastern European emigre Jews. It's a fascinating thing about, why this tiny population in world terms should attract so much attention. It's because all of these things can be claimed simultaneously. Jews used to be attacked for being stateless. And in our day, they're attacked for having a state. Jews have historically been able to be attacked for being religious and also for being secular. You can be blamed for the ultra-religious rabbi, if you're Jewish, and also for Karl Marx. My view is that anti-Semitism and attitudes towards Jews fall into a very, very interesting part of the human psyche. They are They are the perfect group for people looking for single explanations for things. They are absolutely perfect for it. And history has shown this, and all of the literature and the writing on the history of the Jews suggests this. I find it very interesting in our own day that there is this deep interest in it. For instance, I mean, you mentioned AIPAC, but what's the obsession with AIPAC compared to, for instance, do you know about the amount of money that Qatar pumps into this country? Why don't we talk about the Qatari lobby? Why? They have given billions of dollars, among other things, to Ivy League campuses. Mm-hmm. When campuses like Columbia accept millions of dollars in donation from Qatar, why is that not about the Qatar lobby? Why don't we hear about that? Because the Qataris seem not to be in the inherited imagination of people as a guiding hand and as a disproportionately visible minority. But you could do this. I mean, much more impressive in terms of donations to American lobbying entities is, I mean, like, how much have the Saudis paid in lobbying in recent years?
Why does this question upset you? I'm curious.
No, it doesn't upset me at all.
Okay.
But I tell you what it does do is it worries me. And the reason it worries me is because, as I say, I see people falling into a very dangerous rut. And I know too much history, not enough, I mean, we always can know more. I know too much history not to recognize something that's happening at the moment on this question. It's a very, very strange thing when people with not very much knowledge of a situation start to pretend to be wildly knowledgeable about it. And that's really what I've seen in the last year in particular in the US, on the right as well as on the left.
This was actually a very simple question for you, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, it's not that simple. It's actually a very complicated question.
But here's what I was asking you. So I'm having a conversation.
But there is no simple question in relation to this subject.
Well, let me unpack it for you so you kind of know how this came about. Maybe that'll give you a little bit different insight instead of thinking you're being cornered right now. So I'm having a conversation. I'm a guy that wants to know a little bit of everything. I want to know what's going on. I want to hear both sides of the argument. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm at. I want to find out
why a little bit of everything.
I don't have time for every little bit because that's not my specialty. And I'll bring a guy like you because you're well read. I want to hear your side. And I'll bring the other side. That's your world you're in. I run 8 companies. I got 4 kids. I'm a business guy. My specialties are different. Yeah, but we're busy. But you choose what you want to specialize. You can't specialize in 50 different stories. And we're having this debate. We're having this conversation. It's families. There is Muslims in the group who are friends, Christians in the group, and Jews in the community. We're having this conversation. Won't give names because then people know, my community will know who I'm talking about. I say, you guys, you have a choice. You have a choice between living in a city that's 100% filled with 100,000 Muslim families. Mm-hmm. Okay? Great. You can live in another city, it's 100,000, but they're 100% Jewish. Or you can live in a city that's 100,000, but they're 100% Christians. Mm-hmm. You got family, you got kids. Safety and where you want to raise your family, where do you put them? Rank it from 1 to 3, okay? One guy who's the Muslim, he's like, I wouldn't do any of them. I said, why is that? He says, because I want my kids to be raised around, everybody.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be just one or the other.
Sure.
I said, but that's not this exercise. In this context, with this conversation, I want you to choose one. Okay. He says, okay, I'm going to go Christians first, Jews second, and Muslims last.
And this is a Muslim guy.
This is a Muslim guy. Okay. Another guy who's a Jew goes Jew, Christian, Muslim. Okay. One other guy who's conflicted, he says, I don't care. Any one of them I feel safe with because I've seen good in everybody. Right? One guy saying this. But to me, statistically, it's not hard to sit there and study and say, why does a country based on Judeo-Christian religion attract everybody. U.S. attracts Muslims, it attracts Jews, it attracts Buddhists, it attracts Scientology.
Well, that's not a hard question to ask.
That's not a hard question to ask, but why is it that a country that's predominantly Muslim not attract everybody that wants to come there? Why is that?
Well,
so that's the part where I was asking you the question to say, if Jews are 0.2% of U.S., why are they 17% of billionaires? What values and principles do they teach to their kids and families and communities that gets them to move up in the financial industry? This doesn't just happen overnight.
No, I mean, there are lots of explanations for that. I mean, you could go the route that Jordan did, which is about overperformance. I think there's lots of other explanations. I mean, there's, for instance, in banking, the history of Jews in banking is very similar to the history of my own people in banking, the Scots. Why did the Scots, like the Jews, always overperform in banking wherever they arrived? Because they were from very high trust, tightly knit communities, where if you lent and you didn't repay the loan, there was a social price to pay. That's how basically after Adam Smith, that's why Scots and banking was so good, because the Presbyterian society had a social cost to pay if things like, for instance, a loan were not repaid. You would not be able to remain in the community having been dishonest.
Is it pure embarrassment? Is it embarrassment, or is it more like...
Well, it's also ethos and ethics. It's definitely also ethos and ethics.
Got it.
I mean, if you have a community in which, for instance, I'm not saying there is any such community, but if there was a community in which lying was totally acceptable, for instance, you would find it hard to have a mortgage system.
Sure.
So I think it's partly that. I mean, the history of the Jews in Europe is also partly to do with that, the existence in the lending markets.
Okay.
And that came about in part from, as I say, a high trust within a small community. So it's bits of that. I'm not at all concerned about having this discussion, except that I worry about things going into it for this reason, which is that I know the trope that this leads into. And that worries me. You see, I think that any time when society is febrile, and maybe we are especially febrile at the moment because we're living through this second dark age. So I say the first dark age was the one where we didn't have access to information in the Middle Ages. And the second dark age is this one that we're currently in, where we have access to too much information. Mm. And people find it hard to sieve. As you mentioned, you've got 4 kids, you run a successful business and so on. You've not got time to look into everything. In this situation, I think that we are disproportionately likely to be looking for omni-explanations. And I have certainly worried in the last year about people falling into this particular trench. And it's one thing to say, I'm asking the question, and I'm perfectly willing to discuss it and debate it. Of course, we're doing that right now. But I also want to know why. Why is this back as a subject? Why do I see people online talking about Talmud and suddenly becoming... suddenly becoming experts in the Talmud, and they say things like, I've been doing my research. You go, you haven't picked up a book. Come on. Yeah, you've been reading the commentaries. I mean, you do have to be rather suspicious about some of the places people fall into. In the same way that, look, if you just asked me about the Freemasons, I would be kind of, I wonder why we're talking about Freemasons.
I just talked about it last week with this guy that was a guest of ours. Carlson, right?
Randall Carlson. And he was a 32nd degree Freemason. And my drill sergeant in the military was a 32nd Freemason. And we talked about it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it was actually interesting.
It's not that interesting. What was the famous phrase on Freemasonry? It's a bronze key that opens a silver lock and a golden door that opens the room into which there's nothing.
So you're not interested by it for the fact that there's nothing to it.
Nothing to it.
But one could say we've had, 13 presidents that were former Freemasons?
Oh, God, look what I've led you into now.
Yeah,
Jesus,
you're
I
doing
should
it
not
to me.
have
Why are
done
you
to look
doing
at
this
you.
to me now? So
God, you're easy to lead.
This is
surprisingly so.
This is surprisingly
so, if I can say so.
You're so funny. So one thing you got to get credit for, you're a very good shit talker. And I don't know how that happened. Maybe
I don't know whether that's a compliment or not.
No,
Listen,
shit talker is a compliment of mine.
Okay.
But let me go back to it. Again, I'm asking this question for specific reasons. Because if you notice from the beginning of the conversation you and I've had till now, I was data at the beginning with UK. I was data with Dominic Tarczynski on why Poland is a safe place. I was data with Iran. I was data with the 0.2% Jewish community in the U.S. That's what the 0.2%, yet 17% is what we're talking about. Whatever, I think it's 1% of U.S., yet 17% of billionaires is what we have in the States. That's data. Why is that? That's not easy to do. How did that happen? So here's another question.
Well, that's data people don't mind collecting, for instance.
But I think there's a lot to be said about it. So, for example, if a college football team produces 5 different Super Bowl quarterback champions, you have to kind of look into it and say, why are they producing so many Super Bowl quarterback champions?
Well, except
others are not.
We don't do that in loads of things.
Oh, we do that in sports all the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All the time.
Yeah, and also very selectively.
In sports? I'm assuming you're not a sport. Are you a fan of sports or not really?
Certain sports.
Which sports?
We don't go into that because we'll be speaking a foreign language. We'll be speaking a foreign language to each other.
Listen, we get a lot of messages that, hey, how do you guys get your stories? Everything you've been doing. Eventually, I decided to invest a lot of money into it, hired 15 machine learning guys to make a new site available to you guys. We wanted to build it for us, but we're making it public to everybody. It's a freemium. Then there's 2 different paid aspects to it called vtnews.ai. I'm going to play a commercial for you. This is the first time you're seeing a commercial to understand what this is all about. This is an aggregated site where you need to only visit one news site that feeds everything in from others. No bias. We're not writing the articles. Other people are writing it, and you get to read the article and say, this is a left source, this is a right source, this is center. Rob, play this clip. Go for it.
There are currently 8.2 billion people on Earth. 6.9 billion use their smartphones to read an astonishing 2 million news articles every day. Before you read another news article, it's important to understand how news outlets make money. Change, conflict, controversy. In other words, the angrier you get, the more money they make. So how do you get your peace of mind back when every outlet has their own motive?
The media leaving out the full context of what Trump was saying, instead pumping out these types of headlines.
Left-leaning, right-leaning. Who can you trust? Introducing vtnews.ai, an innovative news source that uses AI and machine learning to deliver a more human understanding of what's going on. There's more than one side to every story. Who's covering it? What are their agendas? Why is one side reporting a story when the other side is ignoring it? VT News shows them all. Access to 130,000 news sources. Most advanced AI in news. Ability to chat with VT AI. Bias meter showing the number of left, right and center sources. Lopsided stories are clearly identified. News timelines covering the lifespan of the story and predictions. Bring the pursuit of truth to your fingertips. Visit vtnews.ai, your only destination for news.
Sick.
We are so excited about this. We are so excited about this that finally this product is here that we can release to you. We shared this at the Vol conference. The reception was absolutely insane. For those of you guys that run podcasts or you're busy like me, you're somebody that's an executive businessman, you're running around, you got a lot of things going on. You don't have time for a lot of things. You just kind of want to see the motives and the bias on the stories. Go become a member. There's 3 tiers. The freemium, you got the 2nd tier and a 3rd tier that gives you unlimited amount of questions and customization for your own news, including local. Mess around with it. Go to vtnews.ai. We got a lot of big plans with this year because it's another one of those businesses that feeds into what we're doing. Again, go to vtnews.ai, become a member, take advantage of the freemium or anything else that it offers for you. And we're excited about other things that's coming in the future with this.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.